Hi, Smarter News. We're going to talk about the story of the moment. And the story of the moment matters because it's all about power. I always like to look at news stories and bring it down to what actually matters about this story. And at the heart of this story of this Facebook outage is really a question about power. Who has it? Who doesn't? And what it tells us about our current state of affairs. I also have a problem for you to solve that I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, get your thoughts on. So we're going to have more of a news discussion today because it is ironic. I'm going to be talking about Facebook using one of their platforms. We know Facebook owns Instagram, and Smarter News has really used Instagram as a channel to connect with you. And the reason for that is I want to use something that's very convenient for you. And social media is very convenient. And we're going to talk about the positives and negatives of this. So the big headline, of course, over the last 24 hours was this outage that Facebook experienced across all of its platforms, Instagram, WhatsApp. It's not the longest outage in history. I thought it might be, but it actually hasn't. It wasn't. And we're getting a little bit more insight today on what exactly took place, although there's still some questions. So according to the company, basically what happened was there was an issue with the network, with more of infrastructure, how parts of the company were essentially talking to each other. And according to the New York Times, this affected internal communication as well. Multiple reports, this affected internal communication, how employees were able to communicate with each other, but also how they were able to reach different physical areas of let's say, the office campus in order to solve this problem. If you've ever worked for a corporation, sometimes you get a digital pass and you swipe it to get in somewhere, and apparently in some cases that wasn't working. So this caused a lot of issues for Facebook. But although it may have seemed very long, looks like it took place over the course of about, let's say, 5 or 6 hours, thereabouts, of a total outage, and then started to flicker, come back on. And now it looks like more or less operations are intact. But there was all sorts of reports yesterday. Was it a hacking? Was something else happening? But again, according to Facebook at this time, it was more of an infrastructure issue. Now, there were reports even going back to 2019, I saw today, when there was an outage then, that highlight that Facebook is vulnerable to having one person potentially make a mistake and take down the entire network. So that's also a question that should be asked about the security of Facebook. I know that's one that's been asked several times over the last several years. There's a bigger backdrop to all of this, though. Facebook is a public company, meaning that you can buy shares in Facebook, stock in Facebook if you'd like to. They're not a public utility. Public utility is providing something for the public good, like electricity, for example. And so there's been debates over the years about whether or not these social media companies have become so big that in some ways they are public utilities, but they're not right now. They're public companies. And that is also part of this other side of the story that Facebook is involved in. So you had the complete outage by Facebook, and you had that affecting everyone on the planet, essentially. And I say that with some degree of confidence. We know that Facebook, about a third of the planet, is participating in some way on a Facebook platform. It's about a half of all internet users are participating on Facebook. It is larger when you look at the population of people that are attached to Facebook than any country. And that brings up the question about leverage. And it brings up a question about power. And even when it comes to laws and regulations and duty, who has the power to enforce that with a company the size of Facebook? I'm going to bring that around to a conclusion that actually lies right with you, that I think will be interesting for us to consider as we continue to explore this story. So again, going back to the last 24 hours, the big news wasn't just the outage. It was that there was a whistleblower, a Facebook whistleblower that came forward. Her name is Frances Haugen. If you see her, you might see her again today. Let me pull her up so you can see her face. She worked at Facebook, and she is the one behind these documents that were leaked to the Wall Street Journal that showed internal research by Facebook that dealt with the way that their platform was impacting their users, specifically young adults. We talked a little bit about this last week. Now, I think there are some things happening with the reporting of this story, and I just want to pause here for a second and highlight it. There at times with these big news stories where there is clearly, a monolith, a large company, especially when it comes to corporate America or big business, that there's a pile-on effect of how evil these corporations are. And if we are going to report in a fair way, we have to honestly talk about what these papers reflected. And from the limited amount that I've seen, because Facebook actually released them, These internal documents show Facebook is researching the impact of its platform on young users, and that in some cases it is damaging to young users, especially to girls. On the other hand, the research also shows that in some cases, young adults feel more connected and less alone, more attached to current events, for example, or information. And so it does show both sides. And I think we also have to honor that when we're talking about social media. Listen, I've been very direct with you. We've had problems with Instagram. We've had censorship on Instagram. It is very difficult at times as a small business owner to try to cut through social media and know that if for some reason they took down Smarter News, whoever they are, I have no way of really getting it back. I can't even legally sue the company. I don't even have any standing. I'm a renter. I'm borrowing. I don't even have the rights of a renter, you know? And so we've talked about that. At the same time, this platform has enabled me to build a company that is larger at this point than I would have ever imagined and hope to continue to grow. Yes, social media we've seen the negative effects of it, haven't we? We've seen crimes live streamed. We've also seen charities raise a lot of money on the platform. So we have to show, in order to be intellectually honest in our reporting, we have to talk about both sides. And we also have to address there's a political undertone to some of this reporting as well. You know, in this 60 Minutes piece where Frances Haugen was talking officially now on camera saying, I am the one that is raising my hand saying there's a problem inside Facebook. What she's saying is that they're paying with profits on our safety. They're sacrificing our safety as individuals for profit as a company. This is her allegation, and it's a really serious one, but it's still an allegation. And so we're going to have to let this play out. She's going to be testifying in front of the Senate, by the way, today, or is expected to. So we're going to be watching for the specifics that she offers there. But it's an easy pile-on for politicians, right? It's an easy pile-on as well. And so we really have to stay disciplined and fair and really get an understanding. Is Facebook purposely misleading the public and its users? And if they are, they could be guilty of a crime. And it comes back to that public company. As a public company, really as any company, you're not allowed to lie to people. You can't mislead people. You can't stand up there and say it's this way when it's really that way, because people are investing in your company based on the information that you're sharing, and that's how you're publicly traded. So you can't do that. And Facebook has been accused of this in the past, of acknowledging problems with the company, but sort of talking about them in hypothetics. And even though they knew it was an issue, for example, how users' data was being misused. So this allegation, which is put into actual federal complaints at this time, is at the heart of this whistleblower report, that Facebook is not being honest, is misleading people, is purposely capitalizing on the hateful part of human nature, promoting content that is aggravating. And one of the things that Frances Haugen said in this interview in 60 Minutes is that she was inferring, like, yes, human nature is, we have the good and the bad. But that because of the role that Facebook plays and the presence of Facebook is perpetuating a type of human nature that's unnatural, because it's feeding a cycle that wouldn't otherwise be available. So yeah, there's negative and there's bad, but it's the cyclical nature of Facebook. It's that negative feedback that they're profiting from that is producing a state of disarray and chaos that is again unnatural and potentially illegal. This is what she's saying. In this 60-minute report, where I'm talking just about a little bit of the politics, you might hear this out of the corner of your ear, see it out of the corner of your eye. If you listen to any conservative radio or talk shows, in the 60 Minutes piece, there's a reference to what happened on January 6th at the U.S. Capitol. And she's sort of saying that Facebook had a role in perpetuating this. And although it's not a central part of the report, it's mentioned. And we know that Facebook has taken a stand against certain individual conservatives, such as President Trump, and, for example, punishing President Trump. So there is a little bit of a political something into this story, but at the core of it, it's really about the behavior overall about Facebook. The larger questions it brings up is who gets to decide what's fair and what's good content and what is exactly true. Who gets to decide that? That's been a problem for Facebook. Who gets to enforce that? In your own life, that's a question, right? Who's the person that tells you what's fair? That comes up with, for example, a question about taxation. What's fair to some is not fair to others. And so, again, Facebook as an independent company, even though they are public, gets to make some of these decisions for themselves. So where do they get the power? And what does the government do? Does the government have a role here? That's a question. Does the government, if the government enforces, let's say, a fine on Facebook, it's $1 trillion company. Might have been a little bit less than that because it lost a lot of money yesterday. But it's $1 trillion company. So what leverage does any government have to enforce any laws at this point? You want to know who actually has the leverage? You, the user, right? Because all of us are participating in it. And if suddenly all the users go away, it doesn't, what do they have? It's a really great reminder. It doesn't matter. I see this in a lot of stories. We talk about it. A lot of times we don't talk to you about the power that you have, whether it's as a voter or as a consumer. If you're an American, you are one of the most important consumers in the entire world. You are fueling in a lot of ways the global economy. If you're a voter, you're hiring these people. They work for you. Facebook is big because we participate in it. We have to remember that side of the story too. And I don't want to forget that. And even in the reporting I'm seeing about this today, it's like, well, what are you going to do? They're so big. Well, people can make a lot of decisions for themselves. So will there be a point, and this is a question that's being asked, where Facebook does cross the line? And this either ignites a lot of other different platforms that actually do cut through. Is this an issue where people feel like they're no longer safe with their data on Facebook? Or if these sort of outages happen more regularly, companies do need to operate. Could it be I don't want to say as simple as that, but it's a question to ask. Let me just go over my notes a little bit. I think we've covered some of the basics of it. So this is a very interesting story on many different levels, and I'm really curious your thoughts on it. Here's the problem that I want to ask you to solve. It's just ironic. Just yesterday, on Sunday, I was talking to friends. This has come up repeatedly, of people requesting me to put these sort of newscasts on a podcast forum. Now, we have a podcast you can get on Apple iTunes, all podcast platforms, where I do my interviews, periodically. But one person mentioned to me, well, what about Spotify? You could put the video up, you could put this audio up, and then you would be able to play it when you're in the car and you don't have to access the social media platform and, get lost for 3 hours looking at, shoes, which is something that I don't, I'm not looking at you. I might be looking at myself as something that could happen. So I'm curious what you think about that, if that's something you'd like to see. And also, if maybe we could come up with a cool title for that. It would be the same broadcast as this, but I might put it under Smarter News. So we own Smarter News with an HER and Smarter News with an ER. And both platforms are ours. But, maybe I put it on Smarter News, no HER, on Spotify. So, if people are perusing, they're like, oh, Smarter News, I'm curious what you think about that. I'm taking names. Maybe we could have a prize at the end of it. But it's important. What is another great lesson about this story? It's not only a question about power and who has it and who can enforce it and who's in control. It's also a reminder about backups. I don't know about you guys. I think we should check our smoke detectors and our flashlights and candle supply. Maybe this is a reminder. Facebook, is this a reminder for a little bit of a backup? I'm just wondering. This is a reminder for all of us. All right, guys, I'm curious what your thoughts are. Anyone want to discuss? Have I not answered some questions on this story? I mean, we still have a limited amount of information. I don't think we have all of it yet on any of this. So whether it's the outage or also the whistleblower, what's at the heart of these complaints. What do you think of Facebook saying, and this is something they said in a statement, listen, Facebook is a place for people. Human nature has a lot of things, a lot of sides to it, has the good and the bad. And sometimes that is on our platform. We're trying to amplify. This is the question. Facebook says we're trying to amplify the good. The question is that true? Do you believe it? Is there evidence that they're actually not trying to amplify the good? They're saying their research that they're doing internally wasn't about trying to capitalize on what was harmful to young people. It was to try to figure out exactly what's going on so that they could more productively build another platform. Do you believe that? A platform that would be geared towards younger adults. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. All right, guys. There's so much to talk about, isn't there? I know. And I really do have mixed feelings. Did you guys feel, was there a panic? Was there a panic for you yesterday with Facebook going down, or was it kind of like, A freedom. What was it for you? I'll be curious your thoughts on that as well. Again, smarter news we're trying to build that's in the most convenient way for you to consume. So I too don't want to perpetuate bad social media. I don't want to perpetuate bad habits. I happen to love social media. I happen to also see the downsides for it too. And I wonder what our world would look like without it. But it's hard to imagine it without it now. So are we at a point of no return? Is Facebook so big now that there's no one that has leverage over it? Is it a public utility? It's always been a debate. Is part of it a public utility? Maybe not all of it. So big questions today, you guys. It's great to see you here. I am so glad to see you. Just so that we're clear, it is a relief. I am so glad that we're here together. So we can be grateful, and we can be skeptical, and we can be both at the same time. It's the dichotomy. All right, guys, keep your questions coming. I'm going to try to answer them throughout the day. We have a little report coming on Facebook. I'm going to watch a Senate testimony by the whistleblower, grab any sound bites for you, keep you posted. And we'll continue to watch this. It's one of the biggest stories, I think, that has the potential to impact our lives in so many different ways, whether personally or as businesses, but also as voters and people that like access to information. So a lot at stake here, and I'm excited to explore this together with you. So keep your great questions and comments coming. More always at smarternews.com. By the way, we always do have a backup on YouTube of these videos, and you can always visit our website. It's a great opportunity for me to mention that. So we do have a little bit of a backup, but maybe we could have even another layer. All right, guys, have a great day. And fingers crossed, the lights stay on, and we just go about our business as normal as possible, whatever that means these days. Have a great one, and I'll see you with more on smarternews.com.